Yeah, Coastal Christian came out of Grace Bible many, many years ago. So something to think about, pray about. Hey, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 7 this morning. We continue our study of the 55 commands of Jesus, 55 things that Jesus said do. And so we think we're in good company if we're doing the things Jesus said to do. And today we've got a fun one. And it's often misunderstood, and so we're going to try to bring some clarity to it. I'm going to read Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. Jesus says, "Judge not, let that you not be judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use it, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say that to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when there is the log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." It's an often quoted story, verse that Jesus gives in the world, maybe even quoted by a lot of Christians under this banner, this phrase, "Hey, don't judge me." Ever heard that? Don't judge me. And the implication is that do what you want to do, be who you want to be, and what you do, I have no right to speak to. I have no right to care about. You just get to do what you want, and it's not for me to judge. It's not for me to decide. You live your truth, and I'll live my truth, and we'll live happily ever after. And that's a concept that comes straight from the pit of hell. There is only one truth. Jesus isn't here saying we can't judge one another. He's talking about the manner by which we do it. We judge all the time. Some dude comes to your house and wants to take your daughter on a date. We're going to be doing some judging. I want to see the color of the hair. I want to see what you look like. I want to see where you're headed. You know this pretty well, Pat. I want to know some things, and I'm going to make some judgments and decide if this is going to work or not. Some guy comes to paint your house. You want the house painted white. You're going to pay the guy to paint your house white, and he paints it pink. And you're thinking, well, maybe he's in kind of a pink kind of mood, not for me to judge. Maybe pink's better than white. You know, it's up to you. That's his truth. What am I supposed to say? Would you do that? No, you wouldn't. You'd either fire him and make him pay to repaint your house, or you're going to say, look, dude, it's white, and that's the only option you have. We're going to do some judging. So judgment is part of our everyday life. The Bible even calls us to look at each other and hold each other accountable. It's not so much the judging, it's the spirit by which we do it. And judging is different than being judgmental. You're aware of this? Judging and judgmentalism are very different. Judgmental is about finding fault with people based on personal feelings or assumptions, while you don't hold yourself to those same standards. That's being judgmental. But simply judging is discerning the truth based on facts with a sincere heart for someone else's well-being. That's a spirit by which we should be judging one another. We should be involved in each other. And there's two ways that we can act in a judgmental way. We can judge someone first based on their appearance. And we do that. It's part of just the way we're framed. We can make a call about someone else based on what we see on the surface, whether it's the way they look or the behavior we see. We can decide that that person's not somebody I want to be around, or someone I want dating my daughter, or somebody I want doing work around my house. But it's based on the surface. It's a surface evaluation of someone else. Jesus is saying we're not going to evaluate people based on these surface ideas. That's paramount to a log in your eye when you don't want anybody judging you that way. And so the call there is to create understanding, to try to put yourself in someone else's shoes, what they might be feeling. Somebody who judged on the surface is somebody that looks at someone, maybe you're an extrovert, and I'm an introvert, and I'm a little quieter, and I'm not as boisterous as you are, and you might decide that I'm unfriendly because I'm just not as out there as you, and we're just different, but you think, well, that guy's just a jerk. I went up to him, I told him a joke, he didn't laugh, he doesn't care, doesn't wave at me when I walk in, doesn't yell when he sees me, because that's just not my personality. It would be wrong to judge that person as unfriendly based on a surface snap judgment. John 7, verse 24, write that reference down. John 7, 24. Jesus said, do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. We're supposed to be judging. We're supposed to evaluate in the hopes of helping somebody grow. The other way we can act in a judgmental way, and we'll get into the text here in a second, but is based on our experience. You think everyone should think like you. You think everyone should process life and information like you do. You work hard, but others, maybe they work differently than you, and you decide that they're lazy because they don't work like you work. Or they don't act like you think they should act. And it might not be a sin thing. It might just be a preference thing. But your experience is telling you that that person is not to be trusted or is lazy. And so we make more judgments based on information that's not quite enough. And so in the text, you have Jesus saying, let's not act that way. Judge not, lest you be judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, whether it's by appearance, or whether it's by experience, or whether it's just by preference. I just don't like that person. I don't like the way they conduct themselves. And what God is saying, that this same judgment you give is going to be given to you. And by the measure with which you judge, it will be measured to you. And then he gets into this log and speck thing. I think it's meant to be humorous, really. I think it's meant to show, like, imagine somebody with a 2x4 coming out of their eyeball. And I come up to Gene, and I got this thing just dangling from my eyes, and I say, hey, there's a speck in your eye. Let me, and I turn, and I hit Gene with my 2x4 as I'm looking at the speck in his eye, saying, we need to deal with that. And Gene's response is, there may be a speck there, but hello, there's a problem here, and you just whacked me on the side of my head with this giant log coming out of your eye. It's not that I can't be concerned with the speck, but I first need to deal with the log. I got to process what I need to do to prepare myself to care about Gene. And so the command is to take the log in right there in verse 3, or verse 4. How do you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when there is a log in your own? You hypocrite. The word means to be an actor. It's to underjudge yourself while you overjudge others. But first, take the log out of your own eye. And then you can see. The log comes out first to give you pure and clean vision to say, let's talk about the speck that's in your eye. Let's talk about what I'm learning and what you've learned, and let's talk about how we might reconcile this dilemma. Take the speck out of your own eye first. There's a text in Romans chapter 2, verse 1. Right after Romans 1 and the pronouncements that Paul makes about people that are under the wrath of God, that have exchanged the Creator for the creation, worshiping the creation, not the Creator. They've suppressed the truth, and they've moved away from what's true, and they've become creation worshipers. And you get this sense in the church in Rome is seeing this and going, yeah, tell them. You tell them. And then we come right to the very first verse of Romans 2. And Paul says to those people that are log swingers, he says, therefore you have no excuse, O man, every one of you who judges, for in passing judgment on another you condemn yourself, because you, the judge, practice the very same things. And so the desire that I would have, that we would have together as men, as brothers, is to, our eyes are loaded with specks, and we might see them. But the work that Jesus is inspiring here is a work that says, hey, consider something first. In humility, to think about what's happening in your heart. What's going on with what you're seeing? What's happening with the sin in your life? A few things to think about here is that you may have a log in your eye if you spend more time on the sins of others than on your own sin. How much time do we spend thinking about what others should do differently? And look in the mirror and say, there are some things that you need to do differently. You know, the church is often blamed for being hypocritical. We make a big deal about sexual sin while we're all in sexual sin. And the definition that Jesus gives in Matthew chapter 5 is, if you think it, you're no different than anyone who does it, in whatever manner they do it in. And so there's a way in which the heart needs to be exposed. The mirror needs to be raised so that we look at ourselves and go, I want God's righteousness to reign in the earth. I want what Mike talked about. I want there to be a sense of morality and truth, that we live by the truth. And part of living out that truth is me saying, there are lots of days I don't do that. And so in humility, I ask God for forgiveness. I have respect enough for people made in the image of God to say, I want good things for you. And I want there to be logs and specks being displaced all around the circles I live in. And so it begins, Jesus is beginning to say, it's not wrong to think about how your brother can improve. That's important. We're in accountability. We walk together. But as you walk, you think, your sin is no different than mine. In fact, there is no difference. It costs Jesus the same. It offends God just the same. And so while we think about what others should do, we ask ourselves, what can I do? I wonder if there would be a noticeable difference with the way you and your wife relate if you were willing to spend as much time on what you should do differently than what you think and wish she would do differently. And maybe we spend enough time thinking about what happens in here before I point the finger. Another way to say it is, you may have a log in your eye when all your problems are someone else's fault. That could be a log. The breakthrough for you dealing with the things in your life that are frustrating you in other people's lives is for you to deal with you. He's giving permission to deal with the speck. You see that right there in the text. But the prerequisite for dealing with the specks in other people's eyes is for you to confess your own sin. And let me tell you something. If you come into a relationship with someone else that you're having a problem with, and you want to deal with it, and you come with this sense of humility and respect, a desire for truth, that you haven't got the world wired either, that's an awfully more productive way to engage in a conflict or a struggle in someone else's life than if you come and just say, hey, I've noticed something that's concerning me. And I think you should consider doing this because I've noticed it's a problem, and it can come across like you're kind of on high thinking about, well, I just know and you don't, and I'm going to help you. The help comes as you first deal with your own heart. You may have a log in your eye if you spend more time on the sins of others than on your own. You may have a log in your eye when all your problems are someone else's fault. You may have a log in your eye when you do nothing but complain about other people. Maybe the common thread in all the people that frustrate you might be you. Or maybe it's not. But at least ask the question. Look in the mirror. Boy, things with my kids aren't going well. Things with my wife, they're not going well. Things with people at church are not going well. What is it that I should know about me? That's the log. And ask God, God, are there logs protruding from my eyes when I so often complain about the specks in other people's eyes? Jesus is, this lesson, this teaching, this commandment is given in the middle of the greatest sermon ever given, where Jesus wants practically to change the way we think about the world and ourselves. It's written to believers, and he's telling believers, I'm not saying don't judge, you should. You should do so rightly in John 7:24. But I am saying before you move into what others should do, you ask yourself, what can you do? Tired of marriages not working out? Make sure you have a great one. You ask yourself, what can I do in this home before I criticize what someone else is not doing in theirs? It's personal, deeply personal. And it's so often the case that Jesus, the story, we'll see it even this Sunday in Ephesians 6 about being a slave of Christ and living in relationship with others from a heart that's being changed from the inside out. If all he wanted to do was manage one another's behavior, I can manage you, you manage me, we'll be great. But the heart is the focus. I want to change you from the inside. And so I'm saying, yes, I want judgment to happen. I want specks out of my brother's or my son's eyes. I want it out, and I want you to be the one that does it. But I want your heart to do it in the right way. I want you to be honest. I want you to be humble. I want you thinking less of the sins of others and more on your own sin. I want you thinking more about how you might be causing the problems than always someone else's fault. I want you to complain less about other people because I want you to bring the best out of them. And if you think about it, it's the perfect way for Jesus to raise his sons. It's how you want your kids to live. You want them to live from their heart. Not just do the right things, but do the right things in the what? In the right way. And that's the point here. If you're going to judge, just be aware that that same judgment might come right back at you and you would deserve it. So look for the logs. In a conflict, what have I done? To reconcile, what can I do? In a frustration with the way someone else believes or lives that you don't like, how can I help this situation in my own life first? What does truth and respect and humility look like as I think about what's happening in the world? Why should you take the log out of your eye? So you can see. Not to bash Gene with the 2x4 coming out of my eyeball while I'm worried about that little speck in his eye. I want Gene's speck out. But Gene's saying, appreciate that, brother, but can we talk about what's going on your side of this conversation? You know what? We can. So, what are some ways we can do this to honor what I think Jesus is teaching here? The speck, the log, rendering judgment in the right way. I think first is we do this in the right order. It's my sin first. Gene and I are having Gene, you and I are good. I'm just using it as an illustration because I love you. But Gene and I have this thing going, and I want Gene to maybe think about something, and so I'm gonna ask the Lord, Hey God, is my thinking okay? Am I right here? Would you let your Spirit drive a conversation that would honor you, that would honor Gene, that would be just loaded with integrity and humility? Because maybe I'm wrong. I'm not going to make a snap judgment based on appearances or based on experience. I think, this is what I think, and I think he should think how I think. But you ask the Lord, you think about it. You go in the right order. It's me first. God, my sin is just as bad. My sin nailed you on the cross. My sin is just as offensive, and I'm aware of that. And it's awkward for me to talk about someone else when I know I got... But it's a conversation you should have first. You go in the right order. First, it's you. Clean. Confess your sin, and he will restore you. You seek personal repentance before calling others to correction. So first, you go in the right order. Secondly, you do it with the right heart. You do it with humility. It's not a celebration of how smart you are, how holy you are, and you're going to help your lonely little friend Gene because he needs help, and I'm the one to do it. Does that sound humble? Does that sound like a way that Gene will receive this desire I have for him to think about something in his own life? Doesn't to me. Don't come at me that way. I mean, I'm Irish and Italian. That would not go well for you. Do it with the right heart. I'm a sinner too. I want to help. I want God's best for you. I want God's best for me, for us. This friendship, this relationship, this marriage, this me as your dad, I want so much for good for you. And because I see this thing happening, I'm concerned. And I'm concerned for me too. And that's why I prayed about this conversation. And my heart is for your blessing. I'm not trying to get one over on you. I'm not trying to, boy, if I get to be right. How many arguments have you had with your wife where you felt like you were right, but you lost? There's being right, and then there's being humble in your rightness. So ask the Lord in that moment, God, is my heart right here? Do I have something against Gene that it would make me feel good if I could have one over on him? That I'm better than him? I've discovered something about him? You might think that's crazy, but that's a normal way people deal with conflict in their relationships. Because we want to prop ourselves up. I want to feel good about me. Jesus is saying, we're not doing it that way. That's a log. Your need to be elevated over Gene is a giant 2x4 protruding from both your eyeballs. And it's got to go. So, in the right order, me first, I go first before God. I recognize I'm a sinner too. It's with the right heart and humility and a desire to understand that I'm not trying to one-up Gene. I love him. And then, finally, number 3, it's for the right purpose. It's to help him. If I notice that somebody's maybe, this happened before, I've noticed men not treating their wives very well. Or I've seen people be real arrogant. And everybody around them is kind of turned off by it, but you kind of think, well, it's just the way they are, and so you just kind of live with it. But you desire for that brother, that sister to thrive. And so you go before God. And you understand that, yeah, there might be things people think about me. God, I'm aware of it. I'm sorry. Help me understand. I want what's good. And so my purpose here is to bring your life and fullness into this conflict that I'm sensing, this speck that's in my brother's eye. So, and this is assuming I've already done the work of getting the logs out of mine. And now my purpose is I want to help. I want to bring grace and understanding. I want to often be a listener before I communicate what I think someone else should do. If you think about this is a huge part of our lives. Anyone in this room that has a relationship with any other human being needs to listen to these words, because we are judgmental factories, and it's driven from a sense of insecurity. I need to feel better about me, and I don't, and so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear that guy down. Boy, look at him. Boy, look at them. And the heart really in what he's saying here is, I want you guys to be better than that. You don't want to be judged like that. Neither do they. So the log says, hey, maybe it's not just their sin but yours. The log says, well, been a lot of complaining about this person, Jason. The log says, everyone else's fault is why I'm not who I want to be. So we're going to deal with that, deal with the heart. Walk through this process of, why do I care so much about this? And be more concerned with how we navigate our own sin. And once we do that, we have grace to help others with theirs. Because we're supposed to be in each other's lives. We're supposed to be in each other's grills with love and compassion and humility to say, I want good for you, I want good for me, I want good for us. Isn't it interesting? Then the greatest sermon ever given to help believers live exceptional lives, Jesus talks about judgment and hypocrisy among Christians. Boy, he was so prophetic because it is such a problem in the church. And so I trust and pray that we'll have the capacity to do this work. Yes, I'm going to say it emphatically. Be concerned about the specks in people's eyes, but before you're overly concerned with theirs, first we look at the logs in ours. We self-correct and self-evaluate. Psalm 139, God, search me. When's the last time you prayed that? Know me. Because I know me, and I look in the mirror and I go, yeah, that guy's definitely a work in progress. And see if there's any anxious way in me. Something that offends you. Hypocrisy offends God. Being judgmental, the logs, that's offensive to God. So get it out of me and lead me in the way everlasting. That's a prayer we should pray every day. Search my heart. Search my marriage. Search my family. Search my computer. Search the way I spend money. Search the way I speak to people. Is there an edge in my voice because I'm angry? Is there a sense of others being not who they should be because I know I'm not who I should be? Search my attitude toward my neighbor. Search the anger in my heart about people who don't think politically like I do. God, take a microscope and a laser and point it at me first. And once that work is done, then I think you're free in love and humility with respect for the truth. Start dealing with some specks. Because it has to happen. We have to get better. We need each other. We need to call each other out. It's part of the story. It's part of how God raises sons. But search your own heart first. Questions. Can you think of some ways that Christians have violated this command of the log on the speck? What are some examples where the church has gotten this wrong? And there's several, and you should have no problem doing that. Be merciful, because we're all works in progress. Why is it easier to see others' faults rather than our own? That's a softball there. But here's where I want you to focus, number 3. How do you think we might balance Jesus' command to not judge with the need to hold others accountable in a loving way? That's the money question. How do we balance the tension? And what is God revealing to you about what he wants you to remember from this passage. And so, God, I pray these conversations would be pleasing to you. Jesus, thank you for telling us about the log and the speck. Every man in this room has, or currently right now does, have a giant 2x4 coming out of their eye. So help us deal with ourselves, with you, and then give us the freedom in love and in the right order and in the right way for the right purpose of restoring the lives of others, that they might reflect all your kindness and goodness. Requires that you take our relationships as brothers to another level, and I pray that would happen today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, we'll be back at 7:30 to close it out.